again, here's a question that was worth 2 marks. Give 2 reasons why Christians might be pacifists. And again, here's some suggestions from the exam board of the sort of things that they would see that would get 2 marks to do those things. You can see from some of the answers that they don't need to be hugely in amounts of detail. And you can also get credit for generic responses. Okay, they don't always need to be clearly religious. If you can think about the consequences or why they shouldn't do it, and it's not necessarily religious, it's not necessarily going to be wrong. So again, you're going to get 1 mark for each response. It's a B question and it will be worth 2 marks. So what do Christians believe about non-violence, or otherwise known as pacifism, which is what non-violence means? So Jesus, for a lot of Christians, was considered to be a pacifist. He talked about loving your enemies, praying for them. If someone slaps you, turn to him the other cheek. He never used physical violence towards another human being. And when he was arrested, he didn't fight back. The only time he got angry was when he turned the tables over in the temple, when he felt that God's house of prayer was being used as for a den of robbers and thieves. But he didn't use physical violence, according to the scriptures, on people. There have been a number of Christians who have refused to fight in armies and wars. They have played other roles, such as medics, in those roles which are called non-combative roles. They do this because they believe that this is what Jesus would want them to do. So Christians have a long history of pacifism and not fighting in armies and wars. The next topic we're going to talk about is social injustice. And again, here's a question, it was worth 3 marks. It was asking you to find out how Christians might respond to social injustice. You can see in red the different types of examples. So you're going to need to know what social injustice is and how religious people might respond. But you're also going to need to know how you might respond to ideas of social injustice as well. And again, you can have generic responses that don't need to be overtly religious. If you look at the last 2, specifically, they're not religious responses at all. They're generic responses that anyone could do. So you can use those and get marks for those as well. So when we're talking about social injustice, what do we actually mean? Well, firstly, society is the way we live and all the groups of people that live within it. Secondly, you've got a number of key areas that make up a society. These areas are things like the government, law, education, security and jobs. Now, within that society, certain groups have been treated unfairly within it. Women in history, the poor in history now, black people, again historically, disabled people, and different ethnic groups within these particular societies. And this is what's known as social injustice, where people are not treated fairly, and other groups are given, if you like, preferred treatment. So, here's some examples of social injustice. In areas of government, obviously, they can create the laws that stop people from being treated fairly. For example, in South Africa, the government kept black people separate from whites through the laws called apartheid. The government controlled the army and police. People who protested against this were arrested or killed. That's an example of social injustice. Law. In America, the 40s or 50s, laws kept black and white people apart. This affected access to jobs, education, politics. Black people couldn't vote. People who protested were arrested or killed. And again, the government and the law worked together, and the police and the army again basically enforced this law, which mistreated people who were not white. Security. Again, the military and police control the government and laws. They use power to control all the people and stay in power. If anyone protests, they get arrested and put in prison. Examples of social injustice: people who have been treated unfairly by those in authority and power. Here's a couple of pictures. Martin Luther King was arrested, again for protesting against the disadvantages that the black people were suffering, or the injustices that they were suffering at the hands of unjust laws. And you see a picture on the left where a woman's being arrested for protesting for wanting women to have rights to vote as well. In those days there was an element of injustice. It was unfair, and the law, the police and the military would be used to enforce that injustice. There's a woman here you can see on the cross, pictures of her as a farmer. Her name is Maria Gomez. And Maria Gomez was a Christian who lived in El Salvador. And in a spare time she went to rural villages to teach peasant women so they could teach their children, principally in order to be able to read farming and health leaflets just to improve their quality of lives. But she was perceived as a threat by those in authority that basically became concerned that people who now could read would want their rights and would begin to demand them, and she was killed as a result of this, pursuing justice for these people. And again, she ended up paying with her life. So when we talk about justice, we're talking about fairness in a society. Here's a quote from the Bible, and it says, "Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness as an ever-flowing stream." This is from the Old Testament and talks about God wanting justice to be seen. So God is seen as a God of justice and fairness, and he wants to see justice and fairness within all groups of people and all societies. So here's a key idea or a key way of looking at injustice. So firstly, you start with the belief. So for Christians, they believe that all human beings are created in God's image. And this basically means that every human is innately unique and special. This idea comes from the book of Genesis in the Bible, where God created Adam and Eve, male and female. This means that all human beings should be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of age, wealth, or any other particular position that they may or may not hold. The effect of this belief should be that they should result in Christians or those who believe in God challenging unfairness or inequality, because they believe every human being is made in the image of God. Examples of Christian actions. So people who did this, who put this belief into action: Martin Luther King, racism; Mother Teresa, with helping the poor; William Wilberforce, with overcoming slavery; Elizabeth Fry, who dealt with and sought to get rights for women prisoners; Maria Gomez in Mothers for Mothers and in education. And again, what happened was that they did this because of their belief about human beings being created in the image of God. So a really key thing is that beliefs impact actions and behaviour, especially when it comes to the issue of justice. So let's go on to now this question here. This is a D question worth 6 marks. And here again, I've just reminded at the bottom, what is the examiner looking for? You can see a level 3 response.